I'm your host, Dino, and get ready to be inspired as you learn exactly how to own your role. And welcome once again, everybody, to Own Your Role, the podcast that helps you really understand how to own your role in a better way as a leader, as a spouse, as a parent, any way in your life. We want to help people own their role more and really magnify your purpose and then ignite that passion within you. And today we have a very special guest, especially in the world that we're dealing with right now. I know many of you that I've talked to, the leaders that I coach, there's a huge challenge in the hiring the right people market, right? Whether it be quiet quitting or whatever new buzzword people want to come up with, there seems to be this struggle of finding good talent that want to stay for the long haul and to really help increase our business and become raving fans. I think in a lot of ways, sometimes no longer are the days where somebody joins a business or a company and they stay for the next 30 years. But there are still people out there who want good jobs with good pay, with a fun environment, and make them feel like they're growing in their own life. And that's what we're going to learn about today. We're going to learn why our guest, Suman Cherry, has decided to open up a talent agency that she calls, or I said agency, that she calls a talent agency, to help you find the right people. And we're going to dig into her story and more of her background. Before we get into that, remember, as always, thank you so much for sharing this show with your friends and your colleagues and spreading the word about the Own Your Role podcast. We really do appreciate it because the only way that we grow is through your likes and your subscribes and you sharing it with your colleagues out there. With that being said, let's get started with the show. Suman, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
I'm excited to have you because I love talking about hiring people. I don't know if you know this, but my second book was called Hire and Fire Like a Boss. I have a fast rule that is, and it's not my role, I've heard it somewhere, but I've adopted it, which is hire 3 times slowly and fire twice as fast, because we need to make sure we get the right people in the right roles. Before we get into all of that, we always love starting off our show with your story. So we'd love to hear about your story of kind of where you come from, how you got here doing what you're doing in the role that you're playing now.
So, about myself. So I've always been someone who just loves and is so interested in people. Like, I'm a question asker. I love to ask people's questions, what their stories are, who are they? And I've always been that, like this curious little kitty cat, always wanting to understand people, right? And sales was always like a natural place for me. I did get a degree in communications and public relations, so I've always been sort of on that side. In college, I worked in weight loss sales. I worked at like a Jenny Craig for most of my
Nice.
And that was all service-based, consultative sales, and I was pretty young, I was in my early 20s, but it kind of got me started in that understanding that, again, about understanding people. I always had this like passion for it. And then as evolved, I had a recruiter had reached out to me and about a position I was looking for. And I said, "What do you do?" He's like, "I'm a recruiter." I'm like, "Well, I'm going to do what you do. I love what you do." He's like, "Okay." And then sure enough, how it all works out, right? I just kind of let that go. And then a couple of years later, one of my friends was working in a company and she said, "Hey, we've got this assistant recruiting role. Do you want to apply for it?" And I was like, "Sure." And that's kind of how my story started. I got into it and it was just a really good match for me. It was challenging in the beginning, like anything else, but I got really comfortable with having conversations with people and understanding who they are. And on the other side, understanding who the client is and really becoming that matchmaker. So I worked in, contingent recruiting for most of my career. I worked in medical physicians, a lot of oil and gas. And now I've kind of moved into this more of a construction. I do a lot of construction. I do all types, but construction seems to be kind of my bread and butter right now. And I switched the whole model. So going from this contingent, and if you're familiar with how contingent works, to traditionally recruiting. Yeah. So traditionally recruiting, you have a couple options. You have in-house. So that could be an HR person, or I'd be a recruiter, or it's you're the owner and you're doing it all yourself, or someone else is doing it. And then you're not sleeping because you're like, I have to do all this, right? Yep. You're a growing entrepreneur. Or if you have the ability, you're going out and hiring an external recruiting firm, which is the contingent model, which there is no upfront fee, but they charge you 20 to 25% of the first year salary, which can be very cost prohibitive if you are a growing organization. And there's also risk involved in that, because typically those guarantees are 6 months to a year. And what happens if, and like you mentioned, gone are the days, or like my dad working for ExxonMobil for 40 years, that's not happening, right?
Right.
And so, and then there's not a lot of follow-up after that. So, you're hoping this candidate sticks, they stay that year, and you're not having to replace them, and then you're moving on to the next thing. So
Right.
I kind of changed that model, because during COVID, I had a client ask me if I would do some contract recruiting. I was like, okay, because it was kind of slow and things were kind of crazy then. And so I loved it. I loved it. I loved doing it by the hour. It was so much more intimate. It was so much more communication. It was just all about taking that time, like you talked about. Like, it is so important to take your time to find the right person. And obviously it is also equally as important to let go people quickly, because
Mm-hmm.
it's, if you bring the wrong person in, oh, on
Yep.
multiple sides, it's terrible. It is terrible for your organization, because it affects the people that are there. It affects your leadership. It has so many repercussions. So then I created this consulting model, and this model has been so successful. Clients love it. It's very transparent. It's very authentic. There's constant communication, and the candidates love it. There's no ghosting. There's no pushing someone into a position. There is absolute transparency and authenticity.
That's
There's
cool.
no switch and bait. Hey, I've got a position with this company. Are you interested? It's as simple as that. This is the specs. This is what we're looking for. Yes, no. And you're having these conversations, and you're finding out the skills, but you're also understanding who this person is. We're taking the time to, who is this person? What's the stability at home? What's the situation? What are they really looking for? Who are they as people, right? Like, what values do they hold? Because the values of a person, they carry through in all areas of our life, And so if you're an organization that, we work with companies that are very value driven. If you're a company that really, your value, your purpose, this alignment is so important, that people are going to be equally as important. And those people need to have those values as well. So we created this model, and it's just been really fun, and
Wow.
I love it.
That's so great. So you mentioned a couple of things. I wrote some notes down here as you were talking that I wanted to touch on. First of all, I love that you call yourself a matchmaker, because it really is recognizing that in a lot of ways, this is a marriage between two people, right? Like, there's the having to communicate with one another. There's the being with each other for a very long time, even if you are working remotely, right? There's the connection there. There's so many matchmaking possibilities there. Is that something that how did you come up with that?
I don't know. I am a matchmaker. I'm a connector of people. I always have been, not even just in work. I'm just a connector even with my friendships and stuff. I'm always that
That's awesome.
connector. They
Yep.
say there's different kind of personality types, right? And that's me. I'm the
Yep.
information person. I love to read different things. I'm very open-minded. I like to
Yep.
understand different perspectives, and I like to share that with other people. So I'm always connecting people, and then I just translated that into a company that does that.
That's awesome. I love that. And when you're doing that and you're living in that space of really working with your core competencies and your genius, it makes things so much easier. Let's talk about what's happening, because I want to back up before we get really into the details of what you do. Let's talk about here we are in almost the end of July 2024. Are we in 24 yet? 23? Sorry.
No, 23, I think still, right? I
Wow.
don't know. Last few
Guess where
years have
Dino's
been.
brain is. 23. We're coming to you from the future. So what is the marketplace right now in our world? Basically, America is where we're focusing on, right? What are some of the biggest challenges that you're seeing happening in the marketplace for hiring people?
I mean, I think you have to shift back to what happened in COVID, right? I think people went home during COVID, and they were living a very specific type of work environment. And they went home and they realized, oh my gosh, my mental health is important. My other parts of my life are important.
Mhm.
And so you're seeing candidates, they want more. They
Mhm.
want a community. Like you said, they want a fun environment. The growth piece is important. They want to be the leaders that are not fear-based, where they're, standing behind them and supporting them. And I think that's where you're seeing this challenge, because I think you're seeing a lot of candidates have left the market and they're doing other things. I know a lot of people that have moved away from other things in their creating their own businesses and entrepreneurs, and they're doing new stuff,
Sure.
because their passions are coming through, which is really positive. And then you also have quite a few of candidates who are just very particular now. They're very, very, very particular. If they're really good and they've been with the company for a good amount of time and they have those skills, especially if they're technical, plus they have the people skills, that's like the soft spot for everyone. They have all those, they can be picky. So they're not going to take something that's below their worth. They're asking for their worth. It used to be a situation where candidates were sort of wishy-washy about salary. They were like, no, not anymore. They know what their value is and they expect to be paid that way.
So how do they determine that though? Because, okay, so I know we're living in a space, you say you do a lot in the construction space. I know a
Right,
lot of the listeners of this show are in the medical field, primarily private practices, right? You're a
right,
dentist, you're orthodontist, you're chiropractors.
right.
You know, I think there are people who will, I know this for a fact, there will people who will come in and say, well, I feel my worth is X, but how, as the owner of that business, do you really quantify that? Because that's just based upon what they're saying, because they have a certain skill set, but they might be a terror once you hire them. They might not want to be a part of the value system that you talked about. How do they determine that? And how does the owner determine that?
So I think the worth piece or the amount there is they talk to a lot of people. Candidates are having lots of conversations with multiple recruiters. They're talking to different companies. They're always out there looking. And there's a lot of information online. I don't know how accurate it always is, but they
Mhm.
do have a lot of information that's given to them. So they do have some idea. As far as the worth, I mean, I think the thing is that you as a candidate need to have a range, right? So when you're having conversations with owners, a lot of times owners do feel like, oh, position is worth X amount, and typically it is a little bit less than what the market is because they
Sure.
haven't adjusted the market. And sometimes the candidates are a little bit more than what the market is. And I don't think there's ever 100% way. I think the best way to approach that is you offer them based on what you feel like the worth is, and you show them the value of the organization, what the growth looks like, what the leadership looks like, what it looks like in 6 months, a year, where the opportunities are. And a really good candidate who's motivated and hungry sees the value of an organization. Maybe it's not exactly what the amount they want, but they're going to be very aligned to taking that job as well. If you add the other benefits as well, besides that piece.
Okay, so you said something just now that I think is really important. We need to stick on, hit on, which is if the candidate is motivated and hungry.
Yeah.
Now, we've all heard, seen, I mean, I actually have been attacked online about this whole idea of should you, I'm not going to do what's it called, go above and beyond unless you're going to pay for above and beyond. Well, above and beyond to me is motivated and hungry. Like you want to do a little more. You want to learn, you want to grow. So for number one, for yourself, right?
Right.
Now you got more skills that you can actually put in the marketplace. But number two, because then you're showing your value when it comes time for that raise or that increase, not just that we've been breathing the same air for the last 12 months, so therefore you get a raise, right? So
Right.
how do you, as a great recruiter and as somebody who is that matchmaker, it's kind of like that person that, let's just go real world matchmaking. I believe that if you have to claim you are something, then you're probably not. Like if a guy comes in and is like, well, I am a very gentle and loving person. Well, you're probably, if you got to claim it and you can't show it, or a woman who says, I am a classy woman. Well, you're probably not if you're saying that you're classy, right? So how are
Yeah.
you determining that as a matchmaker?
So I think it's a lot in the questioning when you're having those conversations with
Hmm.
candidates. I mean, I've been doing this a long time. I know when something is coming from ego and
Oh,
when something's
nice.
coming from more of a heart aligned place, I would say, I don't know how you would define it. I'm a little woo woo with my spirituality. So, but I think that when you're having those conversations, you're asking about responsibility. So one of the things is you ask a lot of questions about, tell me about past mistakes, tell me about past failures. What happened there? And
Mm.
it happens where you have a candidate who every single job you're like, why have you had so much movement? And everything is someone else's fault and they don't take any accountability. But I'm the best. I'm the best. I'm worth this much. That's not a candidate we're going to move forward with. Even if all the skills are there and they check all the boxes, that's the accountability piece. And that's something you can't teach someone. Taking responsibility is an attribute that can't be, taught. It's something that you either are or not. It's the same thing with humbleness. It's the same thing with hungry. It's the same thing with, do you have an abundant mindset? Are you have a growth mindset? Are you very scarcity based? Is everything fear based? So I think it's a lot in our questioning or
Love that.
having those questions, because we can address that pretty quickly. And those pieces are very important for a company as well, because you can teach things to someone, but there are certain things you just can't teach.
Yeah, for sure. And I can usually teach skill, but it's real hard to teach motivation. It's hard to teach humility, like you're saying. I love that you said that about the questions, because I think too often I've seen where people just get stuck in their same hiring questions, right? To make sure they can quote unquote do the job, but not, and it's not going deeper like that. I have a question where I ask, tell me about a time where you were working on a project with other people and it turned out badly. What did you learn from that? And my cue is always, if they're like, well, Brenda is an idiot and I should have learned that I should have done this alone. And I should have learned that these people didn't support me the way that I need to be supported. It's like, okay, red flag, goodbye.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
So I appreciate that you say that, because I think, like I said, I think a lot of times people get stuck in worried what they can and can't ask is a big deal.
Well,
And
yeah.
number two is really asking questions that help unveil who this person is.
Right.
Are there any other, I wrote down here, like you said,
Yeah. I mean,
tips, like what are some other tips about that?
so some other tips we identify is, the responsibility piece is huge. And there's this hungry piece, right, as well, like this motivated piece. Like when everyone asks that 5-year plan, but we really ask, like, what is the next step for you look like? If you were to close your eyes and you were to imagine it for me, what does that next step look like? And I have them describe that to me. And if they're like, I don't know, it's really just about money. And it's just, I'm not really unhappy with my job. It's just, I'm not making enough. To me, that's a red flag. There's not a deeper motivation. And honestly, I've challenged candidates, which sometimes I get hung up on. It's happened, and I challenge a candidate and I say, it's not just about money. So tell me what it really is, because the pain is never just about money. And they don't want to tell you what really is. Is it affecting your life? Because the thing is that your job affects everything. It affects you. If you have an environment that's toxic and you don't feel like your worth is being measured and you feel burned out and you feel like there's not good leadership, who do you think is taking the brunt of that? That is your wife, that is your children, that is your husband, that is your physical health, your mental health, that is you not going to the gym, that is you grabbing fast food on the way home. And I know all this because I've lived this,
Yeah, no, totally.
And then being on the other side of it, it's like when we talk to a candidate that is the right match, it is obvious that they are, because there just isn't the red flags, and it might take time. Like you said, I mean, we don't want to submit candidates that don't fit that type of place. And we'll have honest conversation with our clients too. Like, we also hold our candidates accountable. Like, we'll ask them, hey, we really need you to revise your resume. I'm not going to revise it. I know contingent recruiters do that, but I'm not going to touch that. That's not something I'm going to do. Hey, I need you to revise your resume. And can you get this to me by XXX? Yes. Okay, great. And if that hasn't happened, you give them a warning and they still don't do it, we need to move on, because they're not really that hungry.
Yeah. Yeah. And if they can't comply with one thing you asked, how are they going to do that with the owner? I want to know, you just mentioned time. Okay. So this is I have a big pet peeve with this. So you're going to forgive me if I'm way off base, but you got companies like, the Ramsey Corporation, right? Dave Ramsey, they do like 12, 13, 14 interviews. And Dave says, the more you let people talk, the more you let them know. They tell you who they are, right? So their whole thing is they meet with multiple. I actually have a really good friend who just got hired with them, and it took a lot of interviews, right? And then you've got the other extreme where it's like they show up on time for the interview. So we're desperate to put somebody in that spot, so let's just put them in there. Obviously, huge spectrum. Is there for you a good kind of sweet spot for how many interviews and how much time it should take? And I know you're also dealing with in a recruiting situation, there's going to be more time there, but for your average employer, what are you thinking for time wise?
I mean, I think it depends on the position, right? One of the things is, I think the position itself, like how crucial, how involved, how important is this position? Like, how much involvement are they into every part of it? If they're involved in your business, as far as they're involved with your clients, they have access to like shaping your company, you need to have minimum 3-4 interviews. And whether that looks like initial phone interview, where you're just kind of feeling out the energy and kind of having that initial conversation, and bringing them in for a face-to-face, like a shorter kind of interview, like a 45-minute interview, 30-minute interview. And then the next interview would probably be, and if it's a business development role, or if it's somewhere where they're interacting, I would take them out in public. Like I would take them to a public place and have lunch with them. See, what are their table manners like? If they're going to be out with potential clients and those types of things, you need to know sort of, are they professional in that environment as well, right? So I would say 3 interviews at the minimum. I mean, obviously, most of my clients on average, we do, with us handling it, because we do 2 interviews. My assistant does an initial interview where she kind of does the preliminary stuff. I do a deep dive into them, which takes hour and a half. We do a formal submission over. Then, we are also setting information back to them. We're calling back and forth any questions they have. The client, like, hey, I have a question. What's the deal with this? Why'd they leave this? And we're getting those questions addressed. Then we're having another conversation with the candidate again before they interview and afterwards. Right. So, we're spending a lot of time.
You're doing a lot of pre-interviews before the interviews happen, right? So when you're bringing a candidate to a potential owner or a company, they know they've already had some work done.
Yeah.
And pre-screening.
Yeah, I mean, they know. We have a very accurate conversation with them. This was the conversation. This is how conversation flowed. This is, kind of scoring on humbleness. We kind of try to score it a little bit too and give them some idea as well.
Nice.
This is where the motivation is, where the humbleness. This is why they're leaving. This is why the movement. This is their family situation. And we really try to understand who our candidate is. And we present that over to our clients. So our client has a pretty good snapshot, and they trust us because we do such a deep dive. I mean, we're not just sticking a candidate against a wall. It doesn't benefit anyone, right? And we're constantly in communication with our clients as well. So when they go in front of them, there is already been a lot of conversations about them. So the interview process does get narrowed down, typically to 2 interviews.
That gives me a kind of a thought of, for those of you that are listening to the show and you don't have a recruiter between you and that client, I wonder if it wouldn't be worth it to have some sort of prep calls that aren't necessarily, quote, interviews, right? Because I'm a fan of, actually had a TikTok video a while ago, kind of go a little viral, because I said, don't hire anybody unless you've done at least 6 interviews. Now, 3 of the interviews are Zoom, quick, just to make sure you want the job, just so you understand what the job entails. And then we'll dive into your skills and all that other stuff, right? The first 3 are really weeding processes, because the people would be like, oh, like we have time for 6 interviews and, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, I get that, but understand I'm not wasting your time. So we're not wasting our time either. Right. So I wonder though, if people who are listening wouldn't look at the first maybe 2 phone calls as a phone call from someone in your office, someone in your organization that can be that filter person. Like, hey, so did you want to can you explain this a little bit more? This isn't a full interview, but maybe you want to flesh this out, or we weren't able to get a hold of this person who you said you worked with, or whatever. Like that way, maybe prep them a little bit more. I wonder if that wouldn't be something to dive into a little bit more later on.
I think also it would be beneficial. One of the things we approach it is, when I'm talking to a candidate, I tell them about the client first. I'm like, here's the client. Here's very specifically what the role is. This is the environment.
Yeah.
They expect this many hours a week. It is a fast-paced environment. I'm very upfront, right? So I'm like, this is what it is. And then I'm like, I want you to think about it.
Yeah.
I want you to think about it. Like, this is what the role is. And is this going to be a good match? And so if they're kind of hesitant or like, and I'm like, great, think about it. So a lot of times I approach it from that place. If it's a situation where I'm like, I want to make sure they understand what the role is. I want to make sure they understand what the company is, what the requirements are, before we even dive into the next steps.
I think that's brilliant, because man, think about that. If you did that in your own company, when you don't have a recruiter, if you just have some sort of, here's the best way to possibly get this job, you need to know X, Y, and Z. We want to, every company out there wants to find the best person. I remember when I used to work in LA years and years and years ago in Hollywood, one of the things that a lot of the casting directors would pound on is, we want you to be the right person when you walk in the room. We want you to be the character, the actor, whatever, so we can have our job done and we can look good. I think it's the same thing as most owners. They want you to be that person. I want to talk to you a little bit about what you said about the values-based company. And I love that you work primarily with value-based companies. I believe that there should be no other type of company but a values-based company, because whether it be Chick-fil-A or whether it be, you know, Disney or any of these major companies, they should have some sort of values, because my opinion is people would actually, in a lot of cases, choose values over money, although they want to get paid. A lot of people are like, oh, we only find people who want to, you know, be paid crazy amounts of money or blah, blah, blah. And I think if you are really clear on your values, you will attract the right people who, yes, you want to still pay them a fair wage. And I know a lot of people who work for charities, work for nonprofits, who work for companies that they are not getting paid a ton of money, but they believe in the cause. So when you come up against somebody who is, you know, that right fit person, if it's not the amount that they're thinking, is there a process you take them through to like help them see, but this is more based upon your values? So the value, the money is in the value of the program or the company, not necessarily the actual paycheck.
Yeah, I mean, I've had some situations like this actually recently. I had a candidate who wanted, you know, was at a company and it didn't align to her schedule and her family life. It wasn't a bad company. There was a lot of growth.
Yeah.
But she was being paid well because it was a smaller company. So they were relying on her for a lot, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the transition to the other company was a little bit less. It was about equal, right? It was just maybe a little bit tiny of a bump. So there was a little bit of that conversation. And she's like, well, I don't know, blah, blah. So she was like, and I said to her, I said, why don't you like working there? What is it? What's the pain? And she just went through it. And I said, well, that's not what this is. This is the opposite of this. And I know it's scary and all those types of things, but you've been here an X amount of time and you've dealt with this and da da da. I just reminded her of all the pain that she had said about her manager and the fear base and, you know, making her feel bad if she has to go pick up her child. Or I mean, there's a lot of things. When you're a single mom, you have a lot of responsibilities, and that's where the values piece. Because if you're a company that has compassion and understanding that people have lives, right? You're going to have compassion in that situation. But in the company that she's taken has that compassion, right? They are, I mean, they do have responsibilities and accountability to their people, but they also understand people have families and kids get sick and things pop up and you might have a dentist appointment and they're okay with that. And so, yeah, she ended up taking the other job with us. I mean, it wasn't even really more money, you know, it was just a little bit more, but it was a better opportunity for her. And it was a better culture for her where she could feel like she was part of something where people care.
She was valued and right. No, I think that's so important. And for people, that's why I talk to business owners all the time about, you have got to have your values front and center. You've got to have your vision. You got to have your core values, because that's attractive to people, and you will attract the people who are you know what, I'll take the $1 less or the $2 less an hour because you care about me as a person. You care about my growth. You care about me being a mom or needing to be with my kids or whatever that might be. Let's talk about when it doesn't work out. Like, you do a lot of work to get these people, making sure it's the right match, right? Not all matchmakers have 100%, you know, on it.
We have, and it's happened, you know, we've had great candidates who, you know, interviewed, went through the whole process, and I thought there was going to be a marriage, and then there wasn't. You know, I recently had a situation where we had a fantastic candidate. We all loved him. The client loved him. We had worked on the position for a while. And he ended up getting a counter offer, and it was significantly higher than what our company, you know, the company had presented. And, you know, the conversation was with him is, you know, I was upfront with him. I was like, I try not to be too salesy because it's not contingent, right? I'm consulting. I don't want to force someone to a position, but I like to be honest. Right. In my experience of 20 years of recruiting, when you take a counter offer, it doesn't really play out for you very well, because you put your company in a situation where you sort of you kind of forced them into it. They didn't want to do it. Yeah. They could have done that. They didn't show their appreciation then. And usually whatever the real issue is at the company comes back up. So I had that conversation, but he decided to move forward. And my client was very understanding about it. It was disappointing. My client was disappointed. But in the end, it was really interesting because everything always works out. So we ended the position and we said, okay, well, we'll work on it again. He's like, I'm going to take a break, whatever. Well, I was working on another position. Another candidate pops up, not even just happened to show up for another kid. And he happens to be a perfect match for my client. And that's the thing. I just called my client up and I said, hey, guess what I have for you? And then they hired him and it all worked out. And so it always works out. I mean, it's an abundant mindset, right? Things are just like opening doors, and it is disappointing, but there always will be a reason. And in my experience, it always is the reason too.
So do candidates seek you out ever, or are you always seeking out the candidates?
Seek me as well. If we post positions and they reach out to us, or they might see me on LinkedIn or whatever, or they get referred from another client or another candidate. But typically we do a lot of passive recruiting as well. We're connecting with people, we're having conversations. Again, it's a lot of transparency in those conversations. We're not doing the cloak and dagger, like, hey, I might have a position. No, it's like, this is the company. Are you interested? I know you know who they are. Take a look. Let me know what you think. Like, we're treating people like adults.
Right. Right. Yeah. Which is nice. Right. So when you engage with a company, who's your like ideal client that you engage with, that you're looking for to work with?
We're looking for companies that are growing. Obviously, I'm not against huge organizations. It's not something that's we haven't really done in the model yet. We typically have been working with companies under 500 people who have either no HR or very small HR. So what's happening is the owner or the directors are having to do all of it themselves. They're having to do the sourcing, they're having to post everything. Maybe they have an HR person that kind of sorting it through, but it's very small amounts. It's companies that are growing, it's companies that are evolving, companies that are really open to, they are tired of the same candidates that keep being presented over and over, and the referrals that keep, there's no, it's a limited, right? It's very limited, right? So when you work with someone like us, or you work with external recruiters, if you ever work with them, that expands it. It expands your window, it increases your net. And so you have more options. And also what we do is we look at candidates, and maybe they have 3 out of the 4, 3 out of the 5 things, but they have such a great personality. We can tell they're so hungry. We can tell that they're ready for the next step. We can tell that they're trainable. We still present those candidates as well. So those are our ideal candidates, clients that are very value driven. They care about their people. We have to work with companies that actually really care. The leaders are not fear-based. The leaders are very much motivational, inspiring. They want their people to succeed. It's not this, browbeating thing, because nobody wants to work in that environment anymore. Everyone's over that, and this kind of good old boy club thing, no one wants that either. People want to work in an organization. Everyone has different political beliefs and all those kind of things, and it's okay to have conflict, but it needs to be healthy, right? Nobody wants to work with these toxic, super, they always talk about this. There's the worst type of people you could have in an organization is companies that keep those high achievers, but they're like cancers for the organization too.
Yep.
Because they just
all the time
went down. They complain, and their egos are so out of control. They're emotionally reactive. They don't know how to be responsive. And that's the difference too. I want to work with companies where leaders are open to real conversations as well. When I can call them out, like, you lowballed them. That was your fault. And we can do that again, like in a nice way, right? I want to work with clients that trust me. Like when I present a candidate over to you, there's a reason I'm presenting it over to you.
Right.
If you don't like them, it's okay. Give me the feedback. But I want to work with companies that have values, like you said, but values not just because we put a sticker on our break room. We live those values. That's who we really are.
That's so true. It's like, oh, we did this one mission exercise this one time at this one seminar, and therefore we're values company. It's like, no. You talk about it all the time. Is it posted everywhere? Does the whole company know what it is? When I go out to offices, I'll typically send out a survey ahead of time. That's a blind survey to the team. And one of the questions I ask is, without looking, could you name all of your company core values? And 99% of the time, it's like, nope. And they're making up stuff. Well, I think a core value would be honesty, but nothing that is, no, our core values are X, Y, Z.
Right.
And I think it's such a disservice to them. Wow. As we're winding down here, what are some of the biggest challenges, or actually I would even say attractors, that companies should be aware of right now in order to recruit or find the right people? Putting their values out there, we talked about that. What else?
Yeah, I mean, your job description is really important. Like one of the things that we do is we spend so much time on the job description. Like, so we help our clients write the job description. because their job descriptions are like, sometimes they'll send us a job description. It'll be like 10 pages long. I'm like, nobody's going to freaking read this. Like, who is going to read this?
Yes.
Are you kidding me? So we take the time, and there's nothing about the company. Like, we go in, we dissect the company, we go on their website, we're asking them questions, we're creating a whole narrative, right?
Yes.
We want to brand you as an organization.
Yes.
Like, who are you? What makes you unique? What makes you special? And really, what are the essential? We don't need all the fluff. What do you really need? What are the essential pieces of this position that you need? Really, right? And where's the flexibility with that? So that's the number one thing. You got to take time to work on that job description. And
Isn't that fascinating?
Sure it looks good.
I'm just going to say this here because I think it's fascinating. Sometimes I read stuff and I'm like, would you apply for this job? And what makes you any different than the 30 other ones that say the exact same thing? The only thing different that you're trying to do is maybe with your salary. Other than that, it's ridiculous. I think they're the worst.
I mean, it's like on the candidate side, it's the same thing. It's like, why do you have typos in your resume? Why are you not opening it? It's the same thing. Like, this is your calling card. This is your business.
Yes.
Card. So as a company, your job description needs to be like really good. It needs to be posted well. It needs to be readable. The font needs to be right. I mean, it needs to look good.
Well, and one of the things that I say is this, especially when you're in any type of big city with a big company around you, like, you literally have to make yourself look better than the Amazon or the whatever, right? You cannot compete benefits wise. So you got to compete culture, values wise.
Yeah, growth or whatever it is, or whatever makes you as a company unique,
right?
So that is number one. And you need to have your onboarding, because the one thing that is the worst part is you spend all this time finding this great candidate and you have no onboarding. And the person's just thrown into this fire and they're like, what the heck do I do? And it's like, and the company will be like, well, they're not doing good. You did not even prepare this. You didn't even set this up. You didn't take them out to lunch. You didn't have any trainings for them. You didn't even go through or ROI, and tell them what their options are as far as growth. I mean, you need to get to know your people. They don't know you, right?
Yes.
You need to get to know those people onboarding. It's an investment.
Oh, I have a question about that then. Is there like a gossip trail about bad companies that do bad onboarding? So like, because of LinkedIn, do people go up and I haven't seen this, so I wonder.
Seen anything about I see it on the recruiting side all the time.
Yeah, like these people are terrible, blah blah blah.
Oh yeah, I hate recruiters. They ghost everyone. Hate them. People really hate us.
Yeah, interesting.
They know because recruiters do ghost. And it's not really usually their fault. The clients see, the thing is that when you are working on a contingent, there's no accountability, there's no risk. The client doesn't have a buy-in. But when they're working hourly with us, believe me when I tell you, there is a buy-in. They are communicating with you, they are giving you feedback, and the candidates love it.
People pay attention to that which they pay for.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Absolutely. Yep. So another piece is the interview itself, right? When you're interviewing candidates, you need to understand as a company that if you have someone who's has been in a job for 10 or 15 years, they haven't interviewed in 15 years. They might be nervous. They might be scared. They might be timid. That doesn't mean that's who they are.
Right.
It could be a situation like, I'm all about the regulated nervous system. I'm all about regulation, nervous system, safety, all that kind of thing. And as a leader of a group, your job is to help people feel safe to be them. So, I'm certified in NLP, neuro-linguistic, I'm all into subconscious and all that stuff. So I'm always teaching my clients, like, if it's a candidate coming in, they're an introvert, like, and you have a big personality, we need to tone that down so they can feel safe. And I do that with candidates as well, or clients, because I have a pretty big personality. But sometimes, if someone has a quieter personality, I kind of tone that down because I want them to create that safety. So when you're having that interview process, and give them time to answer.
Yeah.
Like I have had candidates or clients say, well, they didn't interview well. They didn't know the answer. Well, give them time to process.
That's a really great point. Because we expect our candidates to be able to conform to what we're doing, and we really need to look at that as we need to conform to who they are so we get the best out of them. Because if you're that
most authentic self, so you see who they are behind the veil. Because what you want to see from your candidate, who is it? We all have the mask, right? We all
Yes.
have the
Yes.
professional mask,
Of course.
but who am I?
Yep.
Who are the person really
Yep.
behind the mask? And that's when you'll see it. Are they positive? Are they abundant mindset? Are they hungry? Are they someone who's like passionate and fun and sees challenges, expansion? Because that's what you want, right? You want
Yes.
those kind of candidates.
Yes. You want that person who's going to become a raving fan, somebody
Yes.
who's going to want to be, who's going to, whether they are or not, who wants to be with you for the next 30 years,
Yes.
right? Who can see
Absolutely.
themselves learning from you and growing. And, everybody wants security. Everybody wants to feel like they don't have to, feel threatened around their future. And
Right.
that's what jobs do. That's what careers do. And the ability to grow and learn. And yeah, I think everything you said is just so great. I love it. How can people find out more about you? I know you're on LinkedIn and all that, but what's the best way for them to reach
I
out?
mean, cherrytalentgroup.com, my website. There's a page you can contact me, and I'm offering like 30-minute consultations. So if you're a candidate and you want some
Nice.
advice on resume, or you want some advice on how do I really get out there and start posting, how do I network myself, how do I make my LinkedIn page look nice, because that's very important, by the way.
Yeah.
And if you're a client on the other side and you're curious about how this would work, and when I'm talking to potential clients, I mean, I know it's new. It's not like they've never used this model. Like, I've never heard anything. That they're saying like, this is so different. And I'm like, yeah, because it's great if you're a smaller company. Like, even if you're just a small company and you have less than 5 people, and you're like, you know what, I need to hire an assistant, I need to hire whatever else, whatever the position is, it's not going to cost you $20,000. It's going to cost you a fraction of that cost. And you're going to get so much from that. We're going to handle everything for you.
That's
You're not knowing
amazing.
any of it.
Well, I'm a huge fan of the book Who Not How is one of my favorite books. Number one, because I have to learn it myself, right? It's if I'm asking myself, how am I going to figure this out? Instead going, who can do that for me? You're an incredible who, right? So people who are listening, owners are listening to this, and even potential candidates are listening, finding the right who's in your life instead of figuring out, how can I figure this out? How can I find the right person? How can I know who can do this for me? And what you've done is you've set yourself up with the Cherry Talent Group as being an amazing who for people instead of them having to figure out how to get it done. And that's a
Absolutely.
really sweet spot to be.
Well, thank you. I
Yeah.
appreciate that. It's been fun. It's new and it's exciting and it's interesting to come out there and bring something new to the market,
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, as we always do, to end the show, we always wrap up with 4 questions around your role, ROLE, in your business. Are you willing to play?
Absolutely. Let's go.
Awesome. So what do you feel is your highest and greatest responsibility on earth?
Wow. In life
Yeah.
itself,
Mm-hmm.
to create from within and not to put my pain out in the world.
That's a good one. So many people
Heal
are
and
slapping their pain
to
around everybody else.
no, to heal, to not take the past wounds, the past traumas, all the things that have happened
Yeah.
and project them back out in our world.
We
That
all
is
we
my
all got
greatest
stuff. Yeah.
role.
So true. All right. What do you want as the ultimate outcome for your life?
Unlimited everything, unlimited freedom, unlimited abundance, unlimited joy, unlimited compassion, love, all of it. Unlimited.
Nice. Love it. What do you consider true leadership to be?
I think true leadership is someone who stands behind their people and
Mm,
supports them,
mm,
lifts them up when they fall, encourages them, sees their strengths, doesn't focus on the negative, but plays on the strengths, and inspires them to be more, and sees who they can be and help them to get to that place.
I love that. I love that. So true. All right. Unfortunately, every single one of us will not get out of this life alive. And there'll be a day where this experience will end. So speaking of experiences, between now and dead, what experience do you hope to or want to have in your life?
I really, 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 really want to have vacation homes all over the world and travel all to all these different places all over the world. I want to travel to the most unique places, like once, and I don't know if I have my business or not, but I want to be able to travel. I want that freedom of just being able to witness and talk to new people and curiosity and learn different cultures and maybe live in another country. I don't know. I don't know what it looks like, but that's
Wow.
what you want.
That's awesome. Sounds wonderful. Sounds wonderful. I love to travel. Well, thank you so much, Suman, for being here and for sharing your light and your intelligence with us. And it's so needed to have an advocate in the world for both the recruiter, or not the recruiter, sorry, the candidate and the company. And the insights you gave us were really, really important. I don't care what the size of the business is, everyone can take away some really great tips and ideas from you from this episode. So thank you for sharing with us.
Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate that.
It's a fun interview. Well, everyone, please reach out to Suman at cherrytalentgroup.com. Get that 30-minute. I mean, gosh, she just gave you 30 minutes of her time to just find out whether you're a candidate, how you can best prepare yourself and get ready to be seen in the best light, or whether you're a company to find out what is this all consultation about? How can you have somebody who's on your side helping you get the best candidates for your business? For me, this is always a great joy to be able to meet new people and connect with people, find out how I can grow in my own business as well. So thank you for being here as a part of our show and being a part of the audience there. Remember, subscribe and like to the show and share it with your friends. And until next time, remember, our goal is always to help you magnify your purpose and then ignite your passion. We'll see you on the next show.